Angular is a wonderful model view, whatever, framework, and as a result, there's a very easy way to build reusable components that can be attached to DOM elements, actually create your own attributes, allowing you to write semantic HTML that makes sense, and then also apply behaviors to existing objects and classes if you so desire. So I'm going to start out, and we'll create an index file. And I'll add Angular to that. And I'm going to start. We'll create an app. And we're just going to call it my app for now. Keep it simple. And then I want to make this droid element. And that's what we're going to use to create our first directive. So I'm going to create a new file. Oops. Call it directives.js. And I'll create my application. And again, no dependencies right now. Now that we've created our application module, let's create our directive. So I can say my app.directive. And I'm going to call this directive droid to go along with that tag that I created in our HTML file. And secondly, I'm going to create a function. And this will be the actual implementation of our droid directive. First, I'm going to start by returning an object. And the first property will be called restrict. Now this tells the directive what types of items it can be attached to. E stands for element. There are a couple others, A for attribute, and some others that are used less often. Right now we're going to focus on the element object. And this is used primarily when you want to make a reusable kind of HTML component. So I'll call it E. Then another property called template, and this will be the actual HTML that gets inserted into your semantic tag that you're kind of now creating. So for now, I'm just going to call it div, and I'm going to say R2D2. Close that div, and there. Now we've got a directive called droid. When Angular bootstraps, it'll see that custom droid tag that we've created, and it'll insert the contents of this template into the HTML. So if we go back to our HTML, we'll see here we've got our droid tag, and now that should bootstrap properly. So let's reload quickly. And we should see R2D2 here. Let's see why we might not. Go to my developer tools. Oh, looks like I spelled Angular wrong. So let's save that. All right, that should work a lot better now. Great. So now we see our R2D2. If I select on this and say inspect element, we'll see our droid tag here, and then the elements that are inside that template directive, the template value within the directive, are then inserted into our droid tag. Creating element directives are a great way to create reusable HTML components. Now let's take a look at how we can add behaviors to those components or to any existing HTML elements within your Angular application. I'm going to start by creating a new directive, and I'm going to call it mouse in. We'll add some mouse behaviors to our R2D2, to our droid directive. So we create a new function, and we'll make a return restrict A. So now this time we use restrict A to create an attribute directive. Now what's interesting is this is actually the default for when you create a directive. So we don't have to actually do this. We can take a shortcut and make it very easy to add a new attribute by taking a little shortcut. So what I'm going to do is instead return a function, and now this is handy because we can take some parameters that will be injected by the Angular framework. So the first one that gets injected is the scope, then the element that we're dealing with, and then finally another one, the attributes of that tag. So we're going to use the element item here, and we're going to bind, and this is very similar to jQuery, we're going to bind to the mouse enter event, and then give it a function that'll get executed when the mouse enter event happens. So for now, I'm just going to console.log it and say mouse entered. So now I'll switch back to our HTML file and add our attribute to our droid tag. So if I add mouse in, my mouse in attribute directive, save that and reload, now when I mouse over, it'll say mouse entered. There we go. So that event fires every time we mouse over. Now let's quickly just add, I'm going to copy this and create an event for mouse out on the mouse leave method or event, and we'll just add mouse out as another attribute. Now this could go on anything. We could put it on the div, we could create it on an image element. For now, we'll just keep it on our original droid directive. Now when I mouse over, we'll see mouse entered, mouse not. Oops. I must have mistyped something because we have a little JavaScript app error there. Oh. Much better. There we go. Mouse entered, mouse left. Now that we've created those two attribute directives, we can actually pass parameters to those via a name value pair like you can in actual HTML attributes. So what we're going to do here is when we mouse in, I want to tell our directive to add a style named red to the element. So we'll just say equals red, and then I'm going to quickly create in a style right here that will correspond to it. Now I'm just doing this for illustrative purposes. Obviously you'd use style sheets and such in an actual application. So let's see your color red, and we'll pass that in as red. So let's go back to our directive. And now you'll remember here we have the third parameter in our method that's attributes. So what we can do is we can get that class name out of the attributes. So here I'm going to say element.addClass, and we could say attributes. And now what happens is each one of the attributes just gets added to this object. So if I say mouse in, now that'll grab the value of that attribute out of the tag and add, in this case we're going to add a class to that. So let's reload, and now when I mouse over, the text turns red. Let's say we want to remove that class. We're just going to do the same thing. I'm going to change this to remove class and make sure we tell it red. So now when we mouse in, it'll turn it red, and when we mouse out, it'll remove that red overlay. Oops. Undefined is not an error. Element remove class. Oops, we want this to be mouse out. To recap, when you want to use and create reusable HTML directives, that's when you're going to use the element type directive, restrict E. If you need to add behaviors to a tag or an element, then you're going to use the restrict A or the attribute directive. We'll look at more advanced uses of these attribute directives later on.